national level. And we've got a recording in progress. Thanks for that, Winnie. I don't know. Yeah, I would never remember these things. Lovely range, wide range of presentations. We're also going to see how the SDGs are really intertwined with others and integrated with other SDGs and aspects. And we're going to take the lessons on these platforms and help us to manage and decide on policies and decision-making better, so that we're going to get some insights on how to improve the governance of our ocean resources. I'm not going to take a lot longer. And I'm going to start us. Rebecca, is there anything you would like to add as co-chair so they can hear your lovely voice?
Hi guys, thanks Letitia.
Hi.
Great to see again all, so many ladies in the room.
I know, it's fantastic. But also happy to have them. Yes, yeah. Okay, all right. Christine? You want to start, see if you can share your screen? We've got a minute or so.
Let me go. There I am. Can you all see my screen?
We can. I can see it at least. If anyone's got a problem, just unmute yourself. I think what we'll do is, remember guys, we've got 10 minutes for a presentation and 5 minutes for questions and answers. What will happen is I will give you a notice when there's 8 minutes done. So when there's 2 minutes left, if you can still, I don't know how many screens you have open. If you can see my video, I don't know if anyone can see my video, the presenters.
I can see.
I'm going to give you the two-piece sign, all right, to say you've got 2 minutes left, just so that you know you can wrap up a little bit. Of course, if you go a little bit into time, it just means we shorten your question and answers time, so don't panic. Don't start rushing through things. We all want to hear, and then there'll be time for engagement afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, true.
My 2 minute notice.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see. We're ready to start. You ready, Christine?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, your time starts now.
Yeah. My title is on assessing local community perception of the coral reef ecosystems, utilization, threats, and management practice impact on marine conservation. This is part of my PhD, one of the objectives, and the co-authors are my academic advisors. The project is funded through World Wildlife Fund, EFN Education for Nature for faculty, aspiring faculty members. And as by the introduction, as we all might understand that coral reefs only cover 1% of the global oceans, and they support a livelihood of about 25% of marine species, that is animal and the fish, as well as plant species. And they are very key in supporting ecosystem services for human well-being, for example, provisioning for fisheries and also for medicinal derivatives. We also have the regulating services for nutrient regulation, as well as sequester some percentages of the atmospheric carbon dioxide. Additionally, we have the supporting services. They support habitats for marine biodiversity, and also they provide services that results into production of sand for our beaches. Irrespective of this, in the Waiau region, coral reef have suffered immensely from the anthropogenic and natural threats, and there's need to alter this as we move forward to benefit further. Perception of the local communities on coral reef is key in ocean governance, as perception influences decision to support or not to support conservation initiative and sustainable use. The role of local community also has often been ignored in decision making, irrespective of the adoption of SDGs 2030 by many global nations, where the policies and plans are geared towards achievement of SDGs. Communities are often ignored. And this study was a baseline for economic valuation of coral reef ecosystem using contingent valuation, later to be done in the study area. My study area is in Kenya, in Kwale County, and is part of the larger Waiau region. We have two marine protected areas, Diani Chale on the upper side and Kisite Mpunguti. The MPAs are of interest because Diani Chale was initially gazetted as an MPA, but it received conflict from the local community, hence no active government management currently, while Kisite Mpunguti is under active government management. The local people we engaged for this study were those who are living within a range of 50 kilometers from the shoreline to to the inland. This is because they benefit massively from coral reefs in terms of tourism and fisheries. Additionally, the county is susceptible to natural hazards, floods, sea level rise, and persistent drought, which affect the livelihood of people living here, and coupled with high illiteracy and low education level. The method I used to gather data for this study was focus group discussion, comprising of 8 to 12 participants, and the participants were aged between 20 to 76 years. That is from the summary of the people we interviewed. Selection of the participants was based on random sampling of those who are currently in existing group, either conservation group or fisher group. They have like membership affiliated, and you are key to separate male and female participants to ensure that the discussion was holistically done to avoid any cultural fear for women to express their views in terms of coral reef resources. Additionally, we did not discriminate on illiteracy level because we had translators who could help us translate in local languages, and the interview was exclusively done in Kiswahili, local language known by many, and audio recorded. In our analysis from the qualitative data we got from the audios, we transcribed from Swahili to English, but we did not back translate into Swahili to see if any meaning was lost. And the themes that we had using content analysis were 5 key themes: perceived utilization, perceived threats, perceived management institution in the area, role of community in marine conservation, and willingness to pay for coral reef conservation, whereby we asked members for each group to express their willingness to pay, which we just assess in terms of voluntary time and also contribution of money. The key findings that we established from this study were that in the perceived utilization of coral reef ecosystem, fishing was key across all the groups, where some quotes, as I can say, an old man from one of the fisher groups said he was born by fishing and he has been raised seeing fishing as the only source of income, and there's no way he can survive without fishing. So according to him, fishing is key to him and its sustainability. Another person who is a young man also said, even though we are educated, during holidays we must go to fish. Fishing is part of our life. Like, I cannot stop fishing even if I'm a doctor by profession, I must fish. And habitat for fish, they also emphasize that coral reef are key to provide habitat for fish in terms of breeding, feeding, resting, and hiding sites. And in this quote, they even say that in some areas, coral reef, that is in the Diani side, are highly depleted, but we normally take vehicle wreckage into the water to provide habitat for fish. So that one, in my sense, was artificial reef. And also some of them were saying they even bring car tires and drop them into the ocean to provide fish breeding grounds, where they don't know. You can see like they don't understand the impact of putting these foreign bodies into the ocean water. Perceived threats to coral reef ecosystem. Across the groups, they highlighted overfishing, which was coupled by use of destructive fishing measures and illegal and regulated fishing in open areas, especially in the Diani sides. While they could say, they could compare like the fishermen in Shimoni, that is the Kisite, gets more fish after a short period of time. While us here, we can spend 8 years in the water without any catch. We come with zero harvest. And then climate change issue, they related it with the coral bleaching. So they could say sometime they could relate with the periods of time, like during the El Nino in 1998, the coral changed their colors to whitish and they were not beautiful when you go there. So that is how we could relate to what they were saying. And others were knowledgeable of the climate change discussion and they could tell us the warm waters, when it is so hot, some fish species even migrate. Others could also link climate change to the change in weather pattern. They say, like, when I went to the field, it was really raining, and they were telling me previously it was not raining as it is. So they were really saying climate change is another issue, and coastal developments was a major challenge or a threat to coral reef. They talked of the blue economy initiatives, which are currently being implemented in the area, Shimoni Port, and they were fearing if they will really able to do their normal fishing activities they are used to, or they'll be restricted. They were also afraid of the hotels which have developed along the coastline, and they could say the impact of the hotels. It has affected the movement of the ocean water, hence comes to the community area. Perceived management, NGOs were perceived to be the key effective management in coral reef conservation, followed by a few government institutions. And local institutions, they say there are few, but not fully as they expect. They also say that beach management unit, even though it's there, it's faced by discrimination and favoritism. The role of community in marine conservation and willingness to pay for coral reef. Some people were saying they are not actually involved fully in decision-making pertaining to marine resource, even though they are the main resource guarders or the holders of the resource. They were saying the government assumes their participation and always ignores them in decision-making and don't even call them in forums, except selecting a few who are known with political leaders. Willingness to pay, they were willing to pay some money, but not to the government. They preferred an independent person or an NGO. The reason for not trust with the government, they say that the government, they cannot trust them with their money. Instead, the government should be the one paying for coral reef conservation. So the relationship with my study to ocean governance and the SDGs is that as we try to address these perceived threats and improve sustainability of the perceived utilization, we strive to bring the community to support sustainable use of coral reef as well as other marine ecosystems through achieving SDG number 14, life below water, and also to address these threats. It starts at the place-based management initiative as we move further to national, regional, and global spaces. We need to increase public awareness, which is a missing gap in all the space. They did know SDGs. They could not even tell you like which SDG concerns with the ocean or which SDG concerns to their livelihood. And they were not even aware of the blue economy prospect. The only thing they say like blue economy is coming to take our port. So when we achieve the targets of this SDG, as I have highlighted, it will really help, especially sustainable, responsible consumption and production. We look further, don't just look at life below water. We should look at the multiplier effect of what we do on land and the effect on the ocean. On the perceived management institution and marine governance, I thought the 3 SDGs are key, inclusive of women in decision-making and participation. We foster for peace and justice within our institution and also legitimacy of those institutions that are mandated to implement ocean governance prospects. And also we need to ensure that we join hands. We don't work independently, as people say, like there is no work on climate change and then we forget sustainable use. We have to work holistically. And then LLMAs, which is a new approach, community managed marine protected areas, is picking up, and like the government managed. So when you engage them and you keep them as the stakeholders, they really support. Unlike when we have the government managing, it's more costly than having them on the resource. I guess that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for the listening.
Fantastic, fantastic, and wonderful timekeeping. 27 seconds over. That is nothing. That is nothing. We'll give Christine a warm round of applause, virtually or in time, in real person, if you want. We've got a lovely 5 minutes left for questions and answers. You are welcome to unmute yourself or raise your hand if you want to ask anything, or put it in the chat. Thanks, Rebecca, for sharing a lot of the SDG narrative stuff. And James, I see you've also got an SDG Reef model, all very nicely linked to our theme. Any questions? Any questions from the floor?
Or any critique to improve on this paper, because it's still manuscript in making. Maybe things that you think will confuse our readers.
Are we supposed to unmute or raise the hand?
Whatever you feel comfortable with, James, go for it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so thank you, Christine, for that presentation, and good to see that we've gone fast far. And so mine is just a contribution, and maybe to point you to the recent work that has also been done. And I see both the links that have been shared here also pertains to the SDG Reef model and the SDG narrative done by Claudius David Obura. So if you can consider that the SDG model, the Reef model, is quite more detailed and it can give you more insight into your work. because it tries to link out how each goal contributes to theater and at the general level with the SDG 14, how they are interlinked with that. So I've just sent you a link, and if you need more details, maybe get in touch and
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic, James. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Miley?
Thank you very much, Christine. That was really interesting. I really love the idea of perception. It's really missing in all those global studies. So I think it's something that you can really put a focus on, either through the narrative or your own way of doing it. But in this all SDG, there is always this what the people think, and I think it's something that would be very valuable for your research, like what the fisherman says, and the fact that they don't even know what SDG is. It shows that there is an issue there. So that's great. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miley. Thanks, Miley. We've got time for one more question or comment.
There's a question in the chat. Or did you answer that already with, do you think a large sample size would have changed your results?
Not really, because I did 16 FGDs. And at some point we could see repeat of perceived use, perceived threat. And that's when we thought maybe the threshold, not unless if I could also done an FGD for the stakeholders now, like the implementers, because now I was focusing exclusively on local. If I could have done maybe on the non-use, those who extend beyond 50 kilometers, it could have changed because maybe their perceived use is different from those who are closer.
Okay. Levi, does it help you? Does it help you? Okay. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much, Christine. For all of our presenters, and I always encourage you, please share at least your email address, maybe in the chat afterwards. So if there are follow-up questions for people or engagements, please do that. Also remember to go to our Padlet because there's a lot of introductions there and people can always find you there. So Christine, thank you very much. We have Lena up next. So I'm going to give Lena a chance to also start sharing her screen and we make sure just all the IT stuff's working well in that. Lena is also presenting something quite close to my heart because I am based very close to Algoa Bay in South Africa. So always keen to hear more about that. Lena, it looks fine on my side. I can see it. Everyone else, no one's got a problem with seeing Lena's presentation? I think we're good to go. Lena, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to put my camera off and I'll give you a peace sign of 2 minutes left when we get to the 8-minute mark. All right.
Perfect.
Okay, everyone. Lena?
If you can hear me well.
The floor is yours, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Letitia. And hello, everyone. And thanks for attending my talk. I'm very happy to present to you today and also to see so many exciting and interesting presentations. And I've already learned quite a lot today. So my name is Lena Rölfer. I'm a PhD student at the Climate Service Center in Germany. And I would like to present to you my current research entitled Enabling Climate Resilience of Coastal Social Ecological Systems through Local Coastal Governance. And before I start, I would like to acknowledge the work by my co-authors and their contributions, Luis Sillier, Sergio Rosendo, Maria Mañez, Meredith Fernandez, Nina Rivers, and Bernadette Snow. So the study is part of the Cities and Climate Change in the Coastal Western Indian Ocean project, short Ecological, which is funded by WIOMSA. And the Ecological project is a collaborative project between the Nelson Mandela University in Algoa Bay, as well as the Nova Institute in Lisbon and the Climate Service Center, Germany, where I'm currently doing my PhD. So the broad objective of the project is to explore how diverse and often uncoordinated objectives of coastal and marine planning can be implemented to enable better adaptation to climate change in a case study in Algoa Bay in South Africa. And I will be presenting some initial project results from the case studies, as well as the plans for my PhD project within the broader frame of the Ecological project. I should maybe mention that I have not been to the case study in Algoa Bay myself due to the restrictions to the pandemic. So the background of my research is the premise that several intergovernmental agreements, such as the SDGs, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and also the Paris Agreement, they all emphasize the need for resilience given increasing environmental challenges to nature and society. But the operationalization of the concept of resilience at the local scale has been challenging to date. So the social ecological resilience approach offers an appropriate lens through which to view and address the dynamics of complex adaptive systems. This means that social ecological systems need to be viewed as a holistic system, including both people and nature, at different scales, as shown in the graphic here by Fischer et al. And it recognizes that people are part of ecosystems and shape them, but at the same time are dependent on the capacity of these systems to provide services for their well-being. This is particularly important against the backdrop of temporary dynamics such as climate change. And for coastal system, of course, this also means that they have to be seen as an integrated social ecological system from land to the ocean. In Algoa Bay, the social ecological system is currently not managed as a single connected system. The land, the coast, and the ocean are viewed as separate management spaces, and laws, policies, and management tools, such as integrated coastal management, marine spatial planning, and marine protected areas, which are managed by different levels of government. So all this impacts the sustainability of the bay, and it presents a challenge to the municipality, especially in a changing climate. In a survey addressing relevant stakeholders in coastal governance of the Algoa Bay system, we found that climate change was perceived as a serious to very serious problem by 74% of respondents, with drought, sea level rise, and coastal erosion being the most cited climate-related threats. Stakeholders thereby represent governmental and non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, university and research institutes, as well as business and industry. And in the graphic below, you can see the 4 phases of the climate adaptation cycle here in the middle of the graphic, including impact assessment, plan actions, implement actions, and monitor action effectiveness. And on the outer cycle, you can see the responses by the stakeholders. So 16% have not started to plan for climate change adaptation, but nearly half, so 43% here, phase 3 and 4, have already implemented actions or are even monitoring them. But even though the necessity for climate change adaptation is acknowledged and organizations have already started to implement some actions, the bay needs to be managed as an integrated social ecological system across the land-ocean interface, and an improved coordination between different management approaches is needed to enable better adaptation to climate change. So the objective for my study and PhD project is therefore to develop and implement an approach for framing the governance system of the Algoa Bay coastal social ecological system in order to enable climate resilience. So we propose to apply different methods and approaches to better understand and frame the governance system, which includes a stakeholder network analysis to understand collaboration and knowledge networks, a capitals approach framework for assessing governance capacities for climate change adaptation, and a fuzzy cognitive mapping method for mapping the policy processes. And I will now walk you through the different methods. So with the stakeholder network analysis, I want to investigate what are stakeholders that are central to knowledge and collaboration networks in the Algoa Bay system. So they are pictured here as a darker blue. And how far climate information and knowledge already shared among stakeholders, and what is the direction and strength of information flows between stakeholders, visualized here by the arrows, and what can patterns of knowledge and collaboration networks reveal about the overlap and collaboration between different area-based management approaches, as mentioned before, integrated coastal management, marine spatial planning, and marine protected areas. With the capitals approach framework, we assess the governance capacities for climate change adaptation. And on the left, you can see a number of key elements that we here call factors that were rated by stakeholders and evaluated as positive, moderate, or negative. And on the right, the factors are aggregated to environmental, social, human, political, and financial capitals for climate change adaptation in Algoa Bay. And you can see, for example, that financial and human capitals are performing lower, which results from gaps in the technical know-how and expertise, as well as lack of knowledge and information on climate change adaptation for the human capital, as well as limited funding for adaptation and the ability to secure such funding for the financial capital. However, the results from the capitals approach framework only show a status quo of the governance capacities without providing really information on intervention points. So this is why we also applied the fuzzy cognitive mapping method, which we map the key elements and the causal loop relationships between them. You can see it on the right here, including the direction and strengths of relationships shown by the width of the connecting arrows. And by doing so, we will be able to identify leverage points in the system for enhancing governance capacities. So leverage points are places in complex systems where a small shift may lead to fundamental changes in the system as a whole. And like this, the system's emergent adaptive capacity can then be modeled. So pulling all of the methods together, once again, the figure, we try to understand the governance system and points where to intervene in the system. Thanks, Letitia. In terms of building networks, increasing governance capacities for climate change adaptation, and identifying emergent system behaviors that might leverage transformative change. And this multi-method approach will ultimately also help to identify how and where in the system the use of information services, and particularly climate services, so climate information and knowledge, can support local coastal governance to enhance the resilience of coastal social ecological systems to climate change. And to put it a bit into the bigger picture, the figure you can see here is from a policy paper that my supervisor, Louis Sellier, and courses are currently publishing, where you can see once again the management approaches, integrated coastal zone management, marine spatial planning, marine protected areas, and how they are often separated and not managed as a single system as they should be. Also across different levels from ocean to land, shore to shore, and administrative levels. And that there is a need for a more integrated approach for ocean and coastal governance, especially with view on climate change. So the outcome of this project is to build capacity on how social ecological systems function, where to intervene, and as well as how to navigate between the different area-based management approaches across scales and institutions and integrate them for more sustainable governance of the coast and ocean. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention and like to acknowledge funding from WIOMSA and also the I2B program of the Helmholtz Centrum. And this work also contributes to Future Earth Coast, the global research project of Future Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll give you a loud clap of hands, and I see there's a few coming up. Thank you very much, Lena. Nice and interesting presentation. And as I say, for me, particularly at the end of my back door, at the back of my backyard. Apologies for not giving you the 2-minute link. For somehow I got a system error on my connectivity, but I got the majority of your presentation. Can I check if there's anyone else with questions? Anyone else who'd like to start off our question and answer session? Desiree.
Okay, then I go. Hi, Lena. Thank you for this really interesting presentation. I think it's very relevant and fascinating. And I'm also just starting my PhD, and I want to look at integrated coastal management. And what I found interesting is when you presented the second model where the different capitals were measured, you said that there was a perception, or it was stated that there's not enough knowledge and expertise. Okay, can I ask again, which kind of stakeholders think that, and how is knowledge and expertise actually measured or defined? So would that be scientific knowledge, or do they look at different kinds of knowledge that exist?
Yeah, thanks for your question. So we are looking at very diverse stakeholders from governmental and non-governmental institutions, civil society, research, industry and business. So very diverse. And also we try to reach out to stakeholders that like fisher associations and so on. So we assess them by organizations, and we ask them to rate the different questions on a scale to 1 to 5 within their own organization. So, and a lot of them indicated that within their organization, they are lacking information on climate change and also on climate change adaptation. And that's why it is performing very low there.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. And then I think I'll follow up with you after the conference, maybe, so I also give some space to others.
Great, yes, thanks.
Thanks, Desiree. Yeah.
My email address in the chat later.
Please put your email address on the chat. And Christine's got her hand up. We've got a little bit of time for Christine's questions.
Yeah,
now.
I just got a quick one. This is so interesting and very informative. And my main catch is on the climate finance. It's scored lowly, and also in that when they were scoring positive, negative, and no, like the scores, climate finance scored lowly. Is it that many people are not like financing, or like they're not aware, the stakeholders you did the survey on? And then on the sea level rise in resilience, is this study focusing on adaptive for the community, maybe sociocultural aspects, emotional aspect on the impact of sea level rise? Maybe if it covers, or is just like not so much on it?
Good question. So I have to say that I did not do the interviews myself. So that part was a project part, and the other part that I presented is what I'm still planning to do within my PhD, but I try to answer nevertheless. So the question on the funding was more generally if they are aware of funding for climate change adaptation, and a lot of organizations were not aware of funding, or stated that they don't know how to apply for the funding. And on the second question on sea level rise, we are not specifically looking at sea level rise, but more generally, what are the different climate threats for the organizations? And sea level rise is one of the threats that was mentioned most by all of the stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a good one. We're looking forward to do the same in the Kenyan coastal area currently.
Great.
Well,
if
it sounds like
collaboration.
You guys need to share your details with each other so you can follow up. Yeah. So again, to all our speakers, please put it on the Padlet. So Rebecca has shared the link to the Padlet for everyone, because we will save that and share that with all the participants afterwards as well. Lena, thank you very much again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Can I ask Meenakshi, can you start sharing your screen so we can see if that's all right? We're going to go now from a local bay in South Africa to broader, looking at the entire region and small island states, and looking forward to what Meenakshi has And actually, again, with the others, I will give you the little peace sign of 2 minutes as soon as you reach your 8 minutes, and then you know you need to start wrapping up.
Sure.
But you ladies are doing well so far.
Can you see my screen? And does the Zoom box come in the way? Because I can see
all the Zoom boxes away. It's just your slides. Very nice and clear. You're 100%. You're 100% well. Anyone struggling to see her presentation? Seems like we're all good. Meenakshi, I'm going to start your time now. So floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meenakshi Poti, and today I'll be presenting our research on a systematic literature review of adaptive responses to environmental change in small islands in the Western Indian Ocean. Small islands are complex social ecological systems with multiple ecosystem services that support diverse livelihoods and human well-being. They are essentially large ocean states because of the high ratio of coastline to land, and also because of the large exclusive economic zones. They epitomize vulnerability and opportunity at both social and ecological levels. While they are heterogeneous in their geomorphology, their culture, the social backgrounds, etc., they also have shared histories, cultures, environmental challenges, and opportunities. They also present a wealth of knowledge on past, present, and future contexts for sustainable development. And this especially emphasizes the learning opportunity of these islands. They are perceived to be manageable because of their small land area, but this is not so simple because they are in the front line of environmental change. And by this, we mean the change that is seen in a social ecological system caused by human influence or natural processes. And they affect societies and the environment at different spatial and temporal scales. Now in islands, they are especially vulnerable to this change because of their high species endemism, the various combined anthropogenic pressures that act in the space, varying from invasive species, climate change, to larger developmental projects. While they also have future uncertainties and rapid land use change. So to address this, there are societal pathways or solutions seen as adaptive responses, which are actions proposed, planned, or implemented by different actors to address environmental change. They're aimed at reducing, preventing, or reverting the impacts, and they aim to develop an overall positive or desirable change, and to thus build its adaptive capacity. But now with the complexity and uncertainty of environmental change, actors and institutions have to think creatively. So they have to think through adaptive thinking, knowledge sharing, and learning. The aim of this systematic review is to map the different responses in 9 small islands in the Western Indian Ocean. So we mainly look at what are the suggested and implemented adaptive responses, who is involved in these responses, and what are the characteristics of effectiveness. So these are the 9 small islands we focus on, which is Lakshadweep, Maldives, Republic of Mauritius, La Réunion, Seychelles, Mayotte, Comoros, Mafia Island, and Zanzibar. While they present a diversity of contexts, both in terms of their geography and political status, populations, etc. But this region is of specific importance because it's warming faster than other regions in the tropical oceans, and because of the rapid social and ecological changes that they face. Also, in terms of a review like this, there seems to be lesser research like that summarizes what's going on in comparison to the Pacific and the Caribbean islands. So this is the systematic literature review protocol we followed. We first looked at, through the Web of Science, at literature between 2010 and 2020. So we first screened the articles in terms of the search terms, where we looked at the title, abstract, and keywords. And we got like more than 1,000 articles after which we looked at the titles, and then I chose 567. Throughout all these processes, we used the exclusion criteria. And finally, we chose 329 articles after abstract and full text screening. And then I used content analysis to interpret the text of these articles. So as you can see in this figure, the distribution of articles varied quite a bit between these islands. So from 74 in Mauritius to only 4 in the Lakshadweep. In terms of categorizing the responses, we modified the framework suggested by Nobel et al. In 2014, where we categorized them into institutional, social, infrastructural, or ecological restoration-based responses. We found that there were a diversity of responses that were suggested or implemented, which were like 140 specific responses. These then were distributed across these different major categories, but often they would combine different responses together to make one adaptation strategy. So for example, if it was an early warning system, it could be both infrastructural, but also informational and also institutional. So there were many examples that overlapped across categories. And then under the institutional, which was the most cited kind of response, the examples include economic instruments like external donor funding and laws and regulations like protected areas, government programs involving restoration or adaptation, planning and policies, and then community-based initiatives, which included participation or participatory research. I won't go through all of these examples because it would take a long time. But then social responses included educational responses like awareness raising and informational responses that included knowledge integration or transfer. And then infrastructural responses had popular engineered responses like hard coastal protection structures, and then technology-based responses like recycling systems or renewable energy. Finally, ecological restoration-based responses were the least cited, although they are the most, they are gaining a lot of attention in terms of recommendations from authors. And this include like vegetation planting or for natural buffers, for example. In terms of the actors involved, there were different actors from different sectors, from governments to research, private sector, and media. The most cited, the most mentioned actor were government-related actors. And this reflects the need for coordination in governments, but also there were local communities and other actors like researchers and NGOs, which specifically were emphasized to have like facilitating roles in terms of exchanging knowledge between policymakers and local communities. External actors were mainly seen as were important players in terms of external donor funding, but also it's important to emphasize here that these funding instruments need to be more context specific and also involve more local voice. Finally, when it came to the effectiveness based on our thematic analysis, we found that the levers or barriers, which we now present as a desirable framework for effectiveness, looked at, in order for a response to be effective, they need to be rooted in the context of the place. So context involves from geography to the social characteristics like culture, gender roles, history, and the kind of relations they have with other countries, and also the ecology of the place. The context also shapes the other elements, which are resources which come in terms of funding, but funding needs to be consistent and from diversified sources. And then time, So timely intervention and emphasis on long-term actions, and knowledge, which included access to knowledge, the integration of different knowledge types, anticipatory knowledge, and also specifically the training of local people in those response interventions. Because in some cases, there were maladaptive responses where a certain, like for example, an infrastructure-based response was set up, but then the people who were funding it, or the pilot project that was led by, say, an external actor, would leave without actually transferring the resources and the knowledge to the communities. And then the governance of responses in terms of coordinated actions that are adaptive and flexible, and also equitable and participatory. Finally, all of this is embedded in the iterative process of learning, which should always be part of the response itself. So constant monitoring and constant learning by both actors and institutions. And in terms of takeaways, this review has learning insights for both island and non-island settings. There is importance in learning from failures and maladaptive responses in order to not keep perpetuating the constant cycle of a certain response characteristics that might be maladaptive. And there is need to invest in long-term multi-pronged approaches that are adaptive as well. It's important to gain knowledge about the wider institutional setting. Although it takes time, it is definitely worth it before implementing a response. There's also need for more context-specific empirical research on response effectiveness, and then more research on traditional responses or community-based responses. And finally, there is definitely a space and a need for more collaboration at the regional level through learning networks like VOGen. And yeah, I would, these are some of the references I used. I went over the slides really fast, I apologize for it, but I didn't realize 10 minutes goes by super quickly. You can reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer your questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll give you a round of applause as well. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Don't worry about going over time a little bit. This is why, yeah, the Q&A is going to be open to anyone who has any specific questions. But also, I encourage you, please, you've shared your presentation, you know, your contact details. Please also share that in the chat afterwards so people can follow up with you. I'm sure there's going to be lots of links. Joshina, she's got her hand up. She's also got her first question. Joshina, we've got a time for a quick question.
Yes, this congratulations. I wanted to know, in terms of recommendations per.
I'm not sure I can hear Joshina actually.
No, I thought it was my connection. I'm also Joshina. I'm not sure if your connection's great. Otherwise, feel free to chat, put it in the chat box, or have we lost you? Okay, she's muted herself. It's not just me. I don't even know if it's a South African connection. Rebecca, you don't seem to be able to hear her either, hey? Okay. Joshina, if you can hear us, please feel free to share your question in the chat box. I think it might just be a technical glitch. Ah, Joshina's got it there.
Sure, thank you. I see a question also from Mona.
Yeah, you're welcome to take that one briefly.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't actually strictly categorize the drivers of environmental change because, but I did take a note in general of like what were the different drivers. So most studies looked at climate change, but it was difficult to isolate which main driver it was because some studies would talk about the interactive synergistic effects of different stressors together. So the main aim of the review was not to go through the different types of drivers itself, but to look at what the responses were.
Thanks. Thanks, Meenakshi. And again, just round of applause. You ladies are doing a fantastic job in this session. Please share your contact details. There's going to be lots of discussions. And I'm going to say it at the end of the last presentation as well. All three of the things we've seen now, I really hope people are preparing papers or policy briefs so it can go into the special edition of the Western Indian Ocean Journal for Marine Science. They all seem very worthwhile. Without further ado, Mayili, you are up next, and my apologies if I mispronounce your name. Please correct me. And also looking at wider within the region, looking at SDG 14, and also bring us back to socio-ecological issues. So we look forward to your presentation. And so far, it seems to be working fantastically. All clear. Anyone struggling to see the presentation?
What do you see?
I see your full screen, so it's
okay,
not.
So you don't see my
notes or anything. No, your notes, no notes, no anything else. Yeah. No, I know the benefits of online presentations with all the other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was worried.
All right.
A couple of times. Okay, so
I'm going to start the time,
yeah,
and I will give you a 2-minute notice when you reach your 8-minute mark. All right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be part of this conference. Today I'll be sharing with you some preliminary results and my thoughts on my postdoctoral research on SDG 14, which I started this year in February at the University of Portsmouth, so it's still quite new. I wanted to start with a little bit of context on governance, which I'll go very fast because we're all aware of it. As we know, the region is very rich in biodiversity. As we say in tuna fisheries, it's called the last frontier for resource exploitation. And the region also has a vast coastal population. In terms of governance, and especially linked to SDG 14, there are strong structures in place like the Nairobi Convention. You can see here the commitment of the Nairobi Convention on the UN website. And there has also been a lot of reports on governance, and especially linked to SDG 14. So you can see here some targets in the blue economy. A report of WWF in 2017 that refers to SDGs in different places. So I would like to discuss a little bit about the research I've been doing. So the first part of my research has been looking at the assessment of SDG 14, especially the by 2020 goals in the Western Indian Ocean, and it went a bit more global in the end. I wanted to do the research this way because there is a lot of everybody talk about SDGs, but nobody has really looked at them in detail, like where we're at the moment. So this is what this research contributes to. So it's a very, to assess these 4 SDGs, I looked at the different database. For example, for SDG 14.5, I looked at the WDPA database. For sustainable stock, I looked at the Sea Around Us project database. For SDG 14.6, I looked at the IUU Index database. And for SDG 14.2, I looked at the MSP global database of the UNESCO OIC program. So I would present to you now a little bit of the result of those. No, not yet. A second part of the research is also try to analyze the socio-ecological drivers and specificities that made some countries achieve SDG 14, especially those 4, better than others. So for those, I chose Madagascar, Kenya, and Seychelles as case studies. And I did those 3 countries because they represent a bit of the 3 stages of achievement, with Madagascar very low in achievement, Kenya, which is like on the very height of achieving, and Seychelles that is assessed as usually as doing pretty well. And the part of the research that has not been done yet is to try to look at those drivers that I will do through an online survey and interviews with stakeholders. So to share a bit the result with you of what I found on those 4 SDGs and the 4 countries, the 3 countries that I've been working on, is that here it is. So I explain a bit, just for the purpose of illustration, to be a bit more detailed in the paper. I put here scale of 5 for achieved SDGs and a scale of 1 for not achieved SDGs. So as you can see here, the broader it goes, the more achieved it is. So here we can see that Seychelles has been doing a lot more better than the two others, and Kenya and Madagascar are doing similarly the same at the moment. So, and then if we look at the goals in particular, so I've clustered them into 2 types of goals. So there is marine protection related goals, and that's 14.2 on area-based management and 14.5 on marine protected area. We can see here that Madagascar and Kenya still have very low achievement on SDG 14.2, or not achieved the goal at all for SDG 14.5. Seychelles has made some average progress in area-based management and good progress in terms of MPA coverage. We've probably all followed the debt swap and the MSP process that is happening in Seychelles that probably really help to achieve this particular goal. And then if we look at fisheries related target, okay, there's a bit of mistake here. It's SDG 14.4 and the SDG 14.6. We can see that the 3 countries have made average progress in issuing a good proportion of fish stock being biologically healthy under SDG 14.4. And also there has been actually some really good progress in terms of response to IUU fishing, which was a big a surprise considering what's happening globally and in the region as well. So for this particular indicator, we looked at IUU responses of countries, and all the 3 countries assessed were doing quite well in terms of responses. So those were the result of the assessment I did. And now I would like to share with you some thoughts about the second part of the research, which has not been done yet, but will be done soon. So now I'd like to move towards the what could be the main drivers of success or failure of achievement. And those are some hypotheses based on a socio-ecological system approach. So I'll be looking at the biophysical dimension, social dimension, external driver, and also some ecosystem services in the region. So as you can see here, for example, that from the literature, I found that there are some policy promoting SDG 14 that are around, advanced MSP and blue economy policy and processes are also some driver of success. And in terms of external drivers, there is, as we've all followed, there is a global push at the moment for SDG 14 and ocean protection, discussion about the subsidies at the WTO, and also a lot of press about overfishing, which helped push the action, I would say. I've also seen in the literature that there is a lot of good ecosystem services that are doing pretty well in the region. In terms of why it has been a slow progress, my hypothesis here is that there are also some degrading ecological system or even social dimensions, but also there are really strong external drivers like globalization or trade demanding ocean products, or aspect of geopolitics, of resource exploitation, and climate change that is, as we've seen in the previous presentation, which was really interesting, that highly affect what's going on in the region. And we also see that because of probably the low rate of protection, there are some ecosystem services that are starting to degrade. So how do we move forward from here? My suggestion my thoughts on this is that we need to look back. Someone else has said that as well. We need to learn from our successes. For 14.6, for example, what has helped countries to advance to fight against IUU. We need to focus on failure. How can we improve protection and of our oceans and coasts within the current means available in the region. Our case is not uncommon compared to other regions. The global assessment that we've undertaken showed that most countries have not achieved that goal at all and will not achieve it. So how do we continue efforts to protect fish stocks, for example, by improving capacity for national stock assessment, and how do we accelerate progress involving area-based management such as MSP, IZCMs, and establish monitoring of those achievements. And maybe one last thing that has also been mentioned by someone else is we probably need to reinvent the way we monitor achievement of SDG 14 because otherwise we will not make it according to what the YO can do and what the YO is able to deliver. So there is some example of the narrative approach of David Obura. That was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And here are my contacts. Please keep in touch and looking forward to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me clapping. Ladies, you've done fantastic in this session, and what a wonderful way to end it off. Can I see if there's any questions specifically on this wonderful piece of research? Brian's got a comment there in the box. He talks about, thank you for your presentation. One of your hypotheses for socioeconomic drivers is advancing the blue economy processes. And he'd like to ask, how do you define or identify these? Very interested to see what you find on this.
Yeah, so for the literature at the moment, the countries have different stages of where they are the blue economy. For example, like Madagascar is literally at the stage of hiring consultants to do their blue economy strategy. Seychelles is very advanced to the stage that they already have an action plan to implement the blue economy. And Kenya is also quite advanced. So in those processes, the more, what I meant by advanced there is that there are policies that are in place, and the region is quite strong on that everybody's on blue economy at the moment. And it's the way where it's implemented and integrated with other things that makes it, to me, advanced. I hope that responds to the question.
I hope that helps, Brian. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, we've got a thank you from Brian. Thanks for your questions. Any other questions or comments from Maile? Wonderful presentation.
Thanks.
Tell me, Maile, from my side, what were some of the most interesting findings? What was there anything that surprised you from the data that you had collected?
I think there were two. Well, the one surprise and non-surprise was SDG 14.5, which was about the coverage of marine protected area, because it's an SDG that started in 2015, but it's also an SDG that is linked to Aichi Target 11. So in the global analysis, literally less than 20% of countries achieved it, which to me was for a target that has been so old now. There must be something wrong with it if there is still very little achievement from the CBD and then the SDGs. And something that was also interesting was the IUU response, which I thought was quite good. That most countries had good IUU responses, policies in place, and good targeted actions against IUU. So that was a good thing. And finally, also a third one was area-based management. The database was really limited. So if we just look at the database, the official database that is there, which is not much, and that's also linked to the indicator, not many countries are involved in MSP or over area-based management. But in practice, we knew among me and some of my other cohort that things are happening in different countries, but they are not recorded at the international level, which makes then the assessment really low. So I think there is also an issue there. That was quite interesting, that we keep putting those targets that are just way too difficult to even monitor and record, and makes our work all difficult at the practical level.
Yeah, with so many people involved in different levels and research, I think it is hard to bring it all together. And I think all the more reason for us to really improve our networking in that. So for that, before I end off the session, because we have a lovely break now, hopefully everyone saw it on the link, our early career scientist in our network is sharing a presentation in an official coffee break that you can have kind of on in the background while you make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Maile, please also share your details. Go onto the Padlet, everyone. So all the contact details are there. We look forward to everyone's publications, whether it's in the special edition or elsewhere. We look forward to everyone joining the WEA network, so the WEAgen network, so we can continue to learn all these wonderful things. Thank you very much for a great and interesting session. Please feel free to grab a cup of tea or a coffee, but also keep the